Greetings, theists and non-theists. I am the Atheist Paladin. I want to respond to Bible-thunking Wingnut's video on subjective morality. So let's get this started.
Why would the non-believer be so determined that morality is subjective? Why is that?
Probably because they view that as a true statement. I mean, why would else somebody argue that the sky is blue? Unless they're really behind something. They have ulterior motives. I don't think so. There's no ulterior motive. They just believe that is true. Now, personally, I don't believe morality is subjective, but that's only the way I view it. But I'll explain later more on.
Well, my understanding is that subjective morality leaves you with no rights, no wrongs, no good, or no bad actions, period. Subjective morality leaves you...
No, it just means that what you determine right and wrong depends on what is the subject of morality. Who's the one determining the morality? Defines what is right and wrong. It's defined by the subject and not the object. And that means God, being the author of morality, means it's subjective to him, unless he submits to some other authority.
With just different. Something is just different. Now listen to me. You have to think about this subjective morality concept that you have adopted. Subjective moral position equals nobody's wrong.
It just seems to think that subjective morality is just like a postmodernist way of, like it's equivalent to postmodernist epistemology, but it's not. Unless you say morality is just a descriptor, then maybe yes, but that's not always the case. Morality is not just a descriptor.
It's, from your perspective, right or wrong. So what's wrong to me could be right to somebody else. I've heard this statement a lot of times.
Yeah, and that's true. What's wrong to you could be right to somebody else. You know, take the instance of revenge killing. In our society, we don't allow that. We don't allow revenge killing, unless it's done by the state, which we call capital punishment. But otherwise, we don't allow revenge killing. Yet in some societies, they simply don't enforce that. If somebody dies and, you know, the family member wants to take revenge because of your negligence or because you intentionally killed them, then that's allowed. And that seems to be the right thing to do. That is a true statement. What people personally view as a description, people do have varying morals. So that refutes your own claim later that that we have all the same morals. We don't.
Hey, it's wrong. I think it's wrong, but that person thinks it's right, so it's subjective. Why in the world would you ever take a stance like that? If you take a stance like that, you cannot look at any culture and say that culture is wrong. You can't look at any other person and say that action is wrong.
Okay. Now, I say morality is objective because you can determine whether or not, concretely, whether a particular action is right or wrong. But some people say morality is objective because of the values. And the values, I agree, the values of morality are entirely subjective. All values, by definition, are subjective. Now, what are the core values? I believe the core value of morality is simply empathy. And with that and a little reasoning, you can get yourself to what is called enlightened self-interest. And I believe this at the heart is what morality is. Now, I believe this can be determined in a more scientific manner, whether or not certain actions, particular actions, are good for society or good for the individual, etc., etc. But some people still want to call that subjective. That's fine by me. I really don't care. But this is how I guard my morality. So taking this into fact, looking at society in the past, with my subjective value of empathy, I can determine things in the past like slavery and denying the women the vote are wrong. Those things are less than empathetic towards those people. So yeah, I can. It's quite easy.
It's just different, and it's a ridiculous statement, a ridiculous position to take. You have no claim from a subjective moral position. You have no claim that morals are good or bad. Just different. Now, from a subjective position, ask yourself this honest question. Can morals evolve for the better?
Yeah, obviously I've already demonstrated that. With a little empathy, yeah, they can.
No, they can't. You can't look back into the history of the United States and say, well, we used to think that was okay, but now we know it isn't. So things are better now. That's from a subjective position. You cannot say that anything is getting better. You also cannot say, from a subjective position on morality, you can't say that moral reforms have ever happened for the better. You can't look at anything in any culture, anywhere, and say, that needs to improve.
Sure I can. Again, I can go back and say, well, the Nazis killing the Jews. Well, that doesn't seem very empathetic. And I can say, well, that needs to improve. Now I realize that my value of empathy is my own. Now, but I also recognize that empathy should be a basic value if you're rational. Empathy should be a basic value if you're a rational person. If you're irrational, then empathy wouldn't be part of your set. But I can still go and say, according to that, well, you're not acting rationally and you're not acting empathetically, so I can judge you because I'm acting according to rationality and according to empathy. If you have objections to being rational and being empathetic, go ahead and make that argument. We'll see how well that goes.
The telling part of all this is, even though subjective morality is it's a disease that you guys are subscribing to that leaves you with no rights and ultimately no rights and no wrongs. The real telling part is the one culture that you say is absolutely wrong, the one culture that's disgusting, is the concept that you have of the Old Testament God.
You know what I'm noticing here between you freaking about there being no rights and no wrongs, you're actually doing an appeal to consequences by saying, society will break down and something like that, and you're creating a false moral panic. This is what is called a moral panic. You're doing a false moral panic over society supposedly breaking down because there's no right and no wrong. There's no up and no down. There's no galactic north or something like that. And there isn't a galactic north. But guess what? We could still tell what north is, at least according to what our planet is. It's still something you can tell in relation to other things. It's not that hard. Now let's get to your God part.
That's the only, even from your subjective moral stance, you want to judge the God that you've perceived the creator God of the Old Testament to be, which is a misrepresentation of who he actually is.
It's okay. So you believe we don't view your God correctly, okay? Did God do Noah's flood? Was Noah's flood an actual event or an event that would be sanctioned by God? Okay, that's genocide. Now, genocide is categorically wrong, but there are a few things categorically wrong. But we can get into that later. Has your God ordered genocide of people like Ammonites? Oh, yes, he has. Has God approved the killings of babies? Yes, he has. Not only that of enemy people, but his own people. Remember God, when the little story of David and Bathsheba. Bathsheba gave birth to his kid, but God cursed that child. And that child died as a result of God's curse. Now, are you going to condemn your God for murdering a baby? I'm not hearing a yes. I thought your morals were objective. I thought it was objectively wrong to kill an innocent baby.
My question is, why wouldn't you boldly say, why can't you say murdering innocent children is always wrong? In any culture, at any time, why won't you say that? Ask.
And I just find it ironic that you appeal to that, you know? You said at any culture, at any time. And yet you excuse it when God does it in the Noahic flood. You excuse it when God does it to the Ammonites. You create exceptions for these things. And yet you asking me, why wouldn't I? Yeah, I would. But I think what's happening here is I've actually seen this many times. Well, you and Side 10 Burger Kid, I think I was watching Abandoned 5. No, not Abandoned 5. It was DM and Cole. DM and Cole. And he wouldn't deny it. Why? Well, because he was thinking of it in a consequentialist manner. He wasn't trying to make but you qualify the statement as murdering innocent babies. That's double qualified. Murder is already saying that the killing was unjustified, and innocent is just another superfluous adjective, I suppose. But when you consider this, I think people look at it and they answer it from a consequentialist view. Could there be a situation where killing a baby could be correct thing to do? No, I lack any imagination of why that would be. But just to say that is wrong, well, you have to make a logical argument to say it's wrong in all circumstances. But there are circumstances to which killing another human being is justified. So saying killing a human being is not categorically wrong. There are some circumstances that you can. So they're just not saying it's categorically wrong. Some may say it's wrong. And I do. I think in many circumstances it is wrong. But you're going to have to show me that it's wrong in every circumstance. But then that requires a little imagination at least.
Ask yourself that question. You innately know that certain things are right and wrong, but for some reason, what is that reason that you hold on to that? You know, you see people doing atrocities. You turn on your news, you look at the world news, and terrible, terrible things are happening, and you know they're wrong. You know they're wrong.
Because I'm an empathetic and rational human being. Not because God tells me so.
But you'll sit there and you'll say, well, from my subjective standpoint, it's okay for them and that culture to do that. Why won't you stand boldly with me and say, no, it's wrong. It's wrong for them to do that.
Okay, I will. I will stand with you. But in order to do that, I will demand that you denounce your own Bible and the acts that your God commands as wrong. Will you do that? I doubt it.
Why won't you do that? The only conclusion is that if you stay in your subjective moral position, there's no authority. You answer to no one. There's no rights, there's no wrong, there's no ultimate right, no ultimate wrong, there's no accountability. There's no ultimate consequences to your behavior.
So what? You're putting the word ultimate upon everything as if it means something. It doesn't. Yes, actions in our lives have consequences. They do. So they're saying, well, there's no ultimate, stick waver in the sky going to bash you if you do anything wrong. Yeah, some people might get away with everything, but that only increases the importance of the justice system that we have now in order to investigate crimes and put the right people in jail. But that doesn't say that morality is somehow useless. It isn't. The more moral the society, the more things we can get done. I mean, you're going to tell me we can put up a skyscraper in an immoral society? In a society where thieving, killing, and stealing is morally acceptable? Of course not. That building wouldn't go up because it requires cooperation. And you cannot get up cooperation without some trust and some empathy. It's that simple.
This is why I believe you hold on to your subjective morality, because that way there's no sin. There's no sin.
Your implied ulterior motive is irrelevant. And you're going to say it's because I want to sin. Okay. I hate to break it to you, but there's plenty of Christians that I have sex with. Yes, outside of marriage. Now, you'll say they're bad Christians. But you know what? They didn't believe fornicating with me was a sin. You don't have to stop believing in God or believing in an ultimate moral authority to change your beliefs about sin. You simply just change your theology. I don't have to be an atheist to believe certain things are right or wrong. I just have to change my... If I believed in God, I would just simply change my theology accordingly. Sin is a theological concept. And what you believe about it is going to be your theology on it. And you don't need to be an atheist to believe certain things are sinful. Or certain things are not sinful. You can believe drinking alcohol is not sinful. Most Christians don't believe drinking alcohol is sinful. They don't believe that. But Muslims, they do believe in drinking alcohol is sinful. And with the Jews, they also believe that eating pork is sinful. It's just different theology. I don't have to reject God or sin, the concept of sin altogether. People change their theology. It's that simple.
There's no consequences. If there is no God, this is because you've adopted this godless perspective on all things, then you have no moral standard. And then everything is free. Nothing is wrong. And then
the standard is empathy. But I don't need a God to tell me to have empathy.
You come to this conclusion. And the reason why I point this out, it's not because I'm claiming that my morals are any better than anybody else. I have the same.
Sure you are. To claim the ultimate moral authority is to claim is the ultimate king of the hill kind of argument. Of course you are. By definition, by the way you're arguing, you have to. All you've done is just made yourself a liar, and you just don't realize it.
Inner compass as you do. And we all know, from my belief is that we all know, I mean, God has made it clear through Scripture that we all know certain things are right and certain things are wrong.
That is patently false, as with my revenge killing example. So
I'm not saying that my moral standard is any better. What I'm saying is there is an
ultimate
moral standard, and
yes, and you go to your ultimate moral standard. Therefore, your ultimate moral standard is better than mine. And there's nothing wrong with saying one moral standard is better than another. But when you do that, you better be right. That's all I gotta say.
We all fall short. I fall short. You fall short, and we all will be held accountable to the absolute moral standard, and we all ultimately need forgiveness of our sins through the blood of Jesus Christ. So don't get me wrong, folks. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else. I'm saying that there are absolute moral standards that we all know, and when you hold on to this subjective moral standard, when you can't even say that, hey, this behavior is wrong, absolutely wrong. And you have to sit there and say, well, it's wrong for me, but for that person, the way that they grew up, it's not wrong for them. I'm pointing the foolishness of this out because it's the foolishness, the folly of.
Okay, yeah, you're trying to point out the reformer's fallacy when it comes to this. But that only takes a strict certain sense of subjective. And you seem to have all the wrong ideas of what subjective means. So your criticism is barely is registering at all. You know?
Atheism. It's an obvious point that shows that, hey, without God, there's complete chaos.
No, there isn't. You haven't demonstrated that at all. You just now finally get into 7 minutes into your video, asserting this as if some God, just because a God would tell me that you don't do this, don't do that, doesn't solve anything. Just because, he has the big stick and he can smash you at any moment, doesn't make it right. You're just saying that either might makes right, or you're saying that he has that right because he created us, or that's an arbitrary standard. Okay, so what? He created us. Why is, he gets to boss around and tell us what the rules are any better than saying, well, empathy would be a better guide? Why would that be superior to empathy? Please explain me that.
And that's why I'm pointing it out. Not to say that I'm better than anyone else, but to say, look, this is ridiculous. There are things that are wrong. And just because somebody was brought up in a family or a culture that said that it is right, it's still wrong for them. And for you to say, hey, no, it's not wrong for them, but I would never do it. It's for me, it's wrong. But from them, from their standpoint, it's.
I'm going to stop it here because we're getting a little redundant here. So thank you for watching, and remember, right? Path to righteousness is rationality.